Hey, I'm really excited. A little bit nervous, but mostly excited. Last night I got emotional, so it might happen. My mom's sitting here, I might cry. But I want to start with thank yous, always starting with gratitude, and namely my ancestors that I want to bring into the room: Ramona Vizcaíno, Nelson Vizcaíno, Ali Cruz, and all the people that did whatever they needed to do so that we can be in this room, so that I could be in this room, that their energy, their guidance, their protection is what has allowed this to be, for me to be in the world. I want to thank my family. My mom who's in the second row, wave. Please, let's give a round of applause to my mama. Thank you. I was thinking about preparing today that we're not very far from the hospital that changed all of our lives, that brought me and my twin into the world. That feels very full circle to be in proximity to the hospital, Columbia Presbyterian. Hey. Yes, so thank you to my family. Thank you to Stefan, who's around with the camera taking pictures. Really, 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 really big thank you to Mariner Books and the HarperCollins team. My editor, Rakia, is here. I don't know where she is, but oh, there she goes. Woo, Rakia, it's been a journey. But I want to thank Rakia, Ivy, Renata, who designed the book. We met one time, and she put all of those pages and images together. It's really incredible. Angie Boutine, who's also part of the design. Beatrice Jason, who's the marketer, and Maureen Cole, who is our awesome publicist. But I want to give a shout out to Rakia again, because the universe really brought us together. I wasn't looking for a book deal. Rakia was looking for people to write books. And the universe brought us together, and we had a really powerful conversation about making a tool that wasn't just about a product or a thing to sell, but how do we create something that people need, that people can use in various contexts. And that Rakia really pushed me. When I first started, I knew what I wanted to write about, but in terms of the images, my thought was, let's just have portraits. And Rakia was like, no, we need to think huge, big. We need to have all kinds of representations. And because of her push, I spent almost 3 years finding artists from all over the world. There's 50 plus artists are in this book, from as far as Australia to different parts of the continent, Europe, the Caribbean, the US, and in all kinds of mediums. And a lot of that was because of you, Rakia. Thank you. Thank you to the Word Up and Recirculation team. Word Up has a special place in my heart as one of the few bookstores uptown. That it's a special place. If you've never been here or heard of it, I really encourage you to learn more about it and how to support it, as was already said. It's very much a community effort. And if you know anything about me, that's something I value a lot. So I really appreciate this space. And we get to have it uptown. Yay. Thank you to ICS Communication Services. So as you notice, we're going to have ASL interpretation tonight throughout the conversation. It's really important for me that we normalize that, whether there's folks who need that in the room or not, that it should be a part of a space, because we never know who needs it or not. And it shouldn't take a person asking for it to be provided. We should just assume that it needs to be in the space. So thank you for being here, for providing that service. The artists that are part of the book, shout out to y'all. I really, really appreciate y'all. It's been amazing how many people have talked about how moved they've been by the images. Some people have been brought to tears. People are saying how it triggered memories of their own families. That's just been really beautiful. And of course, like PBS and all of you for making this possible. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you. And yes, applaud yourselves. And I would take a page out of Nisi Nash Betts' book and say thank you to me. Shout out to me. I don't always do that, but I'm in a place where I need to shout myself out. This was really hard, y'all. Definitely in the top 5 hardest things I've ever done. I've never given birth, but I heard it's close. Bringing that. Some of y'all would know better than me. It took 3 years. But yes, I really am thankful for myself for getting through this, for sticking to it. There was a lot of times I wanted to give up. I wasn't sure why me. Why do I have to do this? And I want to give a shout out to my partner, Ricky. Hey. I don't know where you are. Ricky was definitely my cheerleader. And was the one to remind me that I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And that was really important to remember that this is an opportunity, not an obligation, even though there was a contract. Yes, so that is a little bit about me. And I want to introduce my lovely, 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 lovely person to my left, Magogodi. I want you to say your whole name because people need to hear how it's supposed to be said. But Magogodi and I met, I don't even know. Yes, through a mutual friend some years ago. And we just hit it off because she had amazing nails, like really funky. Her style is funky. And we just really hit it off. We've stayed in touch. If you haven't gotten her book, it's right here, Innards. This is like one of those writers type of books that once you read it, you want to get your pen up or maybe question, why did you write it up? But the stories are brilliant and they're brilliantly written. And I really encourage you, since you all seem to share loving books, that this is one you should have in your collection. It's just really beautifully done. I'm really, really happy to have read it and experienced it. Do you want to say anything? This is me, John States. Yeah, so we're just gonna get into conversation. One thing I'll say too is just to give a little bit about the Black Joy Project. It started in 2015 when I woke up really sad. I was not happy. I was living in the Bronx with my twin Walter, and I just woke up really sad one morning. Hey. At the end of November, and in the beginning of that year, my uncle Ali had passed away suddenly, and between the grieving of my family around that sudden loss, and this was like right after the first Thanksgiving without him. I was the regional director for this nonprofit in New York, where I was responsible for managing like 9 adults across almost every borough but Staten Island, who were supporting thousands of young people in New York City. I also was part of community organizing. So this was right around like the murder of Sandra Bland. It was a year after Mike Brown's murder. Some of the folks are in the room that I got to learn how to be a comrade with. That's all to say a lot was happening outside of me and inside of me. And that one morning I woke up and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, so to speak. And it was in sitting there and trying to figure out, what do I do now? Because I do have to get up. Was remembering literally like the faces in this room, a lot of the faces in this room was this flash of, you know what, even through death, even through all of this stuff, we texted each other smiley emojis. We like watched movies together. We found levity. We found joy together. And that impulse made me go to Facebook when that was a thing, LOL. And I posted a picture of my mom that we had gone to this art thing a couple of weeks before. And I posted a picture of her just with this stream of consciousness saying, like, let's bombard the internet with joy. That I felt important, not to escape what was happening, but that we needed to also bring in joy into the room. And I didn't know what I was saying. I just knew to write that down. So if you get anything else from me tonight, is when you hear a little call or that little thing in your chest or in your head, is to listen to it. I feel like this journey has been a lot about faith and believing in what I don't know is going to come, and that I don't know where this is going to lead. And that because I listened, I was obedient. It brought me to all kinds of places and people. I got to travel to a lot of places and talk to people I never would have imagined, whether it was somebody outside the D on 170 in the concourse, to like sitting in front of hundreds of people in Sao Paulo, to talking to somebody about depression for 2 hours in Johannesburg. That it just really brought me to all these different spaces and places. And now I understand why that was supposed to happen, so that I can thread it together, so I can make sense of, there's something that's going on that connects all of this. And for me, part of that was joy. And I want to be clear that it's not, like I said earlier, to escape. It's to understand better. That if we can understand why and what brings us joy in different parts of the world, wherever we exist, that feels tied to what doesn't then. What is the injustice that we need to address? What are the things that are stealing that joy, preventing that joy from existing altogether? That if you can listen to a protest song in Portuguese from Brazil, if you don't speak Portuguese, it looks like fun. And then when you listen to what they're talking about, you realize that that's their way to propel towards this goal of taking down these military forces that are exponentially killing Black people in Brazil. Numbers are crazier than this country, which is insane to say. But to me, that can be a point of understanding instead of starting with the murders and those types of things. That if we can connect through that joy, then it allows that bond to get even more vulnerable and understand what is behind that. Because we all know none of this is happening in a vacuum, and joy don't come easy, even though it comes. So yeah, that's the Black Joy Project.
Thank you. And again, thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to tell you, this is going to be very much in the family. I feel like I am not only speaking to my brother, but I feel like I'm speaking to his family. I'm so honored to be here. And since you dove right in and you already gave us the entire book lecture, let's rewind a little bit, right? Because I think it's so important that this book begins in the place for you personally, in a place of pain and in a place of the shadows, the parts where joy does not necessarily touch. Actually, joy lives there too, but it doesn't shine through the same way. I want you to talk about this particular year, 2024, and a very important theme that I think is so potent in this book is how this practice of joy is not divorced from these everyday realities. Like what I love about Kleaver is he's a realist. He's not somebody who's like, you know, namby-pamby, funky ideas and like, oh, that's nice, but like, let's get back to real life. No, this is real life. And we are in the thick of real life right now. So situate us, like, where are we? Where are we on this rock that you describe? But where are we and where does this book fit within this conversation, cosmos, political spectrum, some of our struggles that have been going on for centuries? Where are we and how do we locate this book within that stream of what's come before and definitely what is coming to hit us in 2024?
Starting with the heat. It's funny, I was thinking about this, of how this moment that we're in is an example of what I'm talking about in general. That right now, as we're speaking, we know that in a place like Gaza is under attack, that we know that in the Congo, people are still being forced to mine materials that all of our little phones are using to function. The thing that has been coming to me lately is that things are going to get worse before they get better. And that the moment we're in is to really connect, for real, to seriously be connected to each other, because we're going to need each other more than ever. That there's a pattern, right? That in this country, we might be afraid of a certain person becoming the president, or not afraid, but the point is that he's not special. There's a lot of those people around the world that are currently in power or about to rise into it. And so it feels like we're in this moment that we have to come together, and that part of the coming together, is working through the things that are not nice, that are messy, that are ugly. I was talking about this last night in the book event, that means addressing certain things. For example, if we look around the room, I could have put money on who would be in this room today. That almost always it's Black women and Black queer folks that show up. That's who's mostly in the room. Those are the people that we show up for everybody else, not just each other. And when does it become the moment to get not just celebrated, but given and supported in the ways that we need? That when I'm thinking about joy, it's not just the feel-good thing. It's about the necessities. Do you have shelter? Are you safe? Whatever that means to you. Do you have enough food? Those types of things. And that part of that, which is a very Black thing, is community, is village. That doesn't mean you have to have all the things, but how do we connect so that we have those things? And that especially in this part of the world, we're taught the opposite, is to be in our own little silos, and that I, when that's never gotten us through, not through history.
I'm glad you went there, because that's another theme that I think is so potent in the book. And also it is how I understand what Black joy is. This very deep tethering to joy as a communal sport. It's not something that you can practice on your own. It comes from inside, as you talk about, but talk to us about what it means to practice joy in community. Maybe take us to examples in your own life right now or in writing the book that surprised you. What has practicing joy in community what's that experience been for you?
The first example that came to mind is there's a person right here, Vivian. Hey, Vivian, where's Vivian? Vivian is the leader of this organization called Every Black Girl, which you should look it up. It's also in the book if you want to know the story. But I just thought about this moment. So one of the things Viv has been doing is creating. She does conferences multiple times in the year, and I remember I went to one of the first. It wasn't the first one. One of the first ones. And there was a moment. The point of the conference is really to give. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is to celebrate and give space to young women, young people, particularly Black girls, and the people that support them. So the adults, the women, and other folks that support them. And there was a moment where after all the activities and stuff, Viv, it was like a gym. I don't remember the space. It was like a gym or something like that. But we all came to this space, and Viv had done all this planning to honor the women that had done all of this work. And it was done in a way where each person was literally articulating, how did you uplift me, or what are the ways I appreciate you? And that was really touching to take the time to, it could have been a whole day about young people in that way, but Viv was thoughtful enough to make sure that everyone was acknowledged. And just to see how that lit up the room of how moved people were to acknowledge each other. People, that were being shy of, oh, it's okay, I'll always be in the background. But Viv's insistence on, no, you got to be celebrated too, felt like such a good example of that type of like communal joy. Thanks, Viv. And check out Every Black Girl.
I want to talk about, I want to tease this theme of community a little bit more, and I want to go to the places where the book goes, right? This book is also so much, it feels like this delicious smorgasbord of a little bit of, traveling with you to all these places. We go to Amsterdam, we go to Brazil that you mentioned, we go to Johannesburg, we go further, we go to the South where she was. Yes, all over the States. So take us with you to one of these places where you've been. For example, I'm thinking of the all-white party that you attended in Amsterdam. Yeah. And talk to us about the role of joy as a political weapon. I think, for example, I'm thinking, for example, of, Kleaver did this beautiful booth and you were giving political education, and it was to community. Look at that. Oh my God.
You're over here just being communal with the microphone.
Okay, community. You're not cozy. Kleaver did this really beautiful booth, and the movement for Black Lives was there, right? Yeah. Yes, and you were giving political education, but you were also using this tool of joy, and specifically the project. So I'm really curious about the ways in which joy and Black joy shows up in our communities, but how we leverage it for things that are sometimes difficult to navigate through, right?
That is a good example. So at the beginning of all of this, I was part of what was then the BLM, the Black Lives Matter New York chapter. And so we had worked with Afropunk they had this thing called Activist Row or something like that. Anyways, our chapter decided, well, one is we had to split like a 10 by 10 tent. If you know anything about measurements, that's tiny. I didn't know until I saw it. And so like half of the tent, maybe like a diagonal, was a little photo booth, which was a tent. Was like a piece of fabric, and then Dominique, who was the photographer, shooting hundreds of people over the course of 2 days. But on the other half of the tent, I think I'm mixing the years, but I remember one year it was like a carnival that it was like games that were set up and these activities to get a sense of language and, like you're saying, this political education. The other thing I was thinking about, that not necessarily from the example, but one of the comrades from that group, Nikisha Lewis, she has something called the Black Girl Playground, and her vision is literally like, how do you bring together women and girls in a playful setting to talk about deeper things? So for example, it's like, how could that be a space to bring trans women and cis women together to talk about like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna be in community without it becoming this like overwhelming, intimidating, like now we have to build solidarity at this meeting versus I'm about to go double dutch, we relating, so let's talk about some things. which none of that is new. We know what that's like, to start with something sweet as a way to get, kind of like with kids. You mix up the broccoli so they could eat it. That it's kind of that approach of sometimes, or not sometimes, when you feel like you're being told to do something or somebody's pointing down to you, you're not going to listen as much. But if it feels like an invitation and that you're a part of something, then you're more likely to get something out of it. And that's why I feel like joy allows for that, because it makes you, at least for me, I've experienced as, it always feels like that's a part of who I am, or I have a say in it, or I have a part in it. And if I feel like I have a part in it, that makes me feel like I have responsibility as well. And with that responsibility, there's something to maintain. And that, for me, and the joy that I'm talking about is all kinds of people. Is how do I make sure that, not how do I make sure, but how do I keep in mind, like I'm saying, folks that need support, like ASL interpretation. You know, one thing I will say from the Afropunk thing was, one of the years, imagine like it's hot as hell, you're in a park in Brooklyn, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people on this line. And I noticed there was one person, I was introducing myself to everyone, and I noticed this person wasn't looking at me when I was talking. She was looking at somebody next to me. And so I was like, that's curious. And I realized she was signing. And that moment changed a lot for me. In that moment, it was just pictures on Instagram. And it really made me think, is this really for all kinds of people? If it's just on Instagram in an image, I'm not actually considering all kinds of people. Um, and that's why I ended up doing things like the radio show that we did together. Of what are all the that means that this then needs to exist in a lot of different ways, because it has to touch a lot of kinds of people. And if I only post pictures and those types of things, that's only touching a slice of people. And my goal is to get to as many people as possible. So that's why there's things like recordings of a radio show. There's been art shows, just a lot of different things to try to touch different kinds of people, so that there's as many entry points as possible. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I'm so glad you're coming back to something I wanted to circle to, because at the very beginning, when you spoke about why we have sign today, I'm always, always, always learning from you. Like, that's one of the beautiful things about this friendship, right? I'm always taking notes. And the thing that I took a note about today, and I hope everybody heard Kleaver say this, is how do we actualize, how do we normalize everybody being in the room in a way where we're not waiting for somebody to raise their hand and say, hey, here's what my specific need is, right? And one of the things I think the tie back to this book and the project, like you say, you're thinking of how do I make this book accessible to so many different people. But one of the things that's really telling to me as I'm reading the book is how often you come back to Black people, and how often you come back to this invitation of, if we get this right for Black people, then we are getting it right for everybody. You keep saying that. Say more. What do you mean by that? Because that's a lot for a lot of people. Some people will hear it and do this, and some people will hear it and do this and be a little fuzzy. Like, what am I hearing? I'm not sure. What do you mean? Break it down.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I was listening to an interview that you did this week, and I was like, whoa, I have a very, you literally said some of the things I was thinking about in terms of this question. But to me, it's, let me see, a few things. One of them is, I've gotten the chance, the privilege to live and see all kinds of people in different parts of the world. And I feel like that was enough to get the understanding that it's really the same thing over and over and all over the world. Hey, Coco. That's my niece.
Coco.
It's really the same thing over and over. That at the end of the day, wherever you are, regardless of race, blah, 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 we're very much similar. My calling, or what I feel, is through Black folks, that I understand is through our liberation, through our being well, that makes it so that the rest of the world is well. That makes it so that all of us can be well, because my goal, in my ultimate thing, is everyone in the world deserves to be well. We deserve to be well. We deserve to not suffer from starvation and all of these different things that we're put through, because we actually live on a planet that has enough food and space and everything for everyone. It's the other things that have been set up that make us believe that's not true, that deny us access to those things. And of course, the ones who pay the biggest price for that are often Black folks, wherever they are. And that's why, to me, that's the charge, is if we can support us, then we get to support everyone. But it's always with the understanding that it's about the world of people. We're not the only people in the world. It's not just black people in the world. But I'm very clear that we're the ones that have a certain, there's something that we need to attain or have a space for that will make that space for everyone else. That's the way I usually experience things. When we good, everybody's usually good.
Yeah, it's the truth. Um, I want to ask you specifically about the practice of joy.
Yeah.
I want to ask. I'm going to come back to this question of how you practice joy, but let's stick with this idea of all of us, right? Because another thing that I think is really powerful in the book, and you say this in the book, is this is an invitation for everybody to practice joy. You say that you believe joy, and you say you believe it's our right, all of us, to be well. But in the book, you also make a claim that everybody gets to participate in Black joy. What does that mean?
I said that. Okay.
You did.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be funny. Yeah, I think it's. I just drew a blank. I got caught in my thoughts.
Everybody gets to practice Black joy. And let me make this pointed, right? Because we all in this room, we know about Juneteenth. We are in the middle of Black History Month, right? And we'll see all kinds of yummy, delicious things that we agree with that are celebrating us and celebrating Blackness this month. And it will come around again in a few months when it's nice and hot and we can be outside. And there's always this pause. And it's usually coming from a lot of, honestly, awkward energy. A lot of times it's white people being like, can I come to the cookout? Like, I don't know. Do I bring something? Like, and Kleaver, I read the book, and Kleaver said we can all be in it. Kleaver, that's what you said in your book. Yikes. So I read that, and I read it with this really beautiful invitation to all be present for something that's bigger than all of us, and something that honors a very specific iteration of what it means to be human. But I resonated with the way that you understand what Black joy is, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me, in reading your book, I was like, there's room here for everybody. So I want to hear you talk about both navigating that awkward thing when that picnic comes around, but then also in a serious way, like, what is the invitation here? Who's Black joy?
What I was thinking of when you're saying that is, one is joy is a human thing. What I argue in the book is that for me, one of the things I say is Black joy, if it were a shape, to me it would be a circle. Because when we add the Black part, it becomes a communal thing. It's a very we thing, that of like the hundreds of people I've asked simply, what does Black joy mean to you? A lot of them gave almost all of them, it was an example that involved somebody else. It wasn't just a solo story, or this thing happened to me, or I did this thing. It was, when I did this thing with so-and-so, or when we did this thing. Which was true even for me that morning where all this started. It wasn't all these flashes of me. It was the group and the people that were a part of my life. I think that's where the distinction is for me, is that if joy is a for everyone thing, I think what we can learn from Black joy is the power of what that looks like in the collective. I'm not saying we're the only people that give that example, but that's the examples that I've learned and seen and been a part of, is the power of coming together. Like the examples I give of being an Afropunk or those other stories, is none of this has ever been just me. It's always been me and one other person. I'm also a twin, so it's always been me and another person. Hey, Walter.
There he is.
But I mean in the sense of like, there's something to learn about the power of collective. I was talking to someone earlier, I don't remember who it was, but the power of collective, and how that is, to me, is a really, really important insight. That even the place I got to travel and stuff, it was all groups of people, mostly. Some of them I got to speak to one-on-one, but a lot of it was witnessing people in collective and community doing something.
I do want to talk about you.
Okay.
And in talking to you and in centering joy, I want to do something with this community in a moment, but
Okay.
right now let's just zero in on you. Um, what what is the practice of joy to you? And I love that you're talking so much about community, and joy almost always is in tandem with somebody else. You came into, it's such a provocative thing that you came into the world with somebody else. You were already, you came as a bundle of joy with another bit of joy. Like that's so miraculous. And your mom's there. That's really,
And we're Aquarius born in February.
I
So
mean,
it's
come
very
on.
rare. I'm
I
just
mean,
saying.
come on.
A
Come
lot of stars
on.
align.
Come
A lot
on.
of stars
All
align.
the joy is just like, we're just going to do this through the roof. But what I'm asking you about, and the book speaks about this, is the spiritual component of joy. You talk about every single human being has a right to joy. This is our God-given right. This isn't something that you need to go out there seeking. And I would like to hear you talk about where joy comes from inside of you, because sometimes when people hear it and you're describing this thing that lives in you, it gives them permission to understand, like, no, I don't need to wait. Like, this isn't something, I want you to have this book on your shelves. Okay, every single home place should have this, but this is not a capitalist project. You don't need to have a thing on you in order to understand or to experience this. So talk about that.
Yeah. I will say that the practice part is the most important part to me. Is even in the writing process, a lot of it felt like a test. A lot of it felt like, are you serious? Like, are you really about this life? Because so much was happening during those couple of years. That the practice, where it comes from, one is gratitude. A lot of it is just being thankful of, like I said earlier, Ricky reminded me that I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And I don't have to do this, but I really get to do it. But yeah, remembering that, the gratitude, remembering the people that made sacrifices, my mom, my grandma, the people that did a lot of things so I have the privilege to write a book. Like, that's not everybody, they tell everybody to write a book, but that's not the easiest thing. And if you've written a book, that's not the only thing you have to do. That most writers have one, two, three, and other jobs, got kids, whatever, their lives, plus writing a book. That all of that to me starts with gratitude, of being really thankful for that. I also started doing this thing over the last couple of years. Um, I had a stone that I got at this butterfly conservatory in St. Louis once that said joy on it, but it had like this really perfect groove on the back that my thumb fit on. And so I started rubbing it and saying, I transform fear into love, and I transform love into joy. Whenever I felt anxious or scared or not sure of what to do, but remembering that joy is a part of me on the inside, and I get to come back to that. Really simple things like taking deep breaths when I can, because again, when you're anxious or in that survival mode, your body responds too. It's shorter breaths. You can't sit still as much. It's a lot of movement. So also learn therapy. That's part of my practice. Shout out to Veronica Dance, my therapist. Um, that is just really important for me to do those. And again, let's be very clear. This is not me. I'm not sitting up and being joyful every day. That's disingenuous. But it's something to aspire towards too, because I want to name that this is not an easy thing, and it's not as simple as choosing joy. I'm not saying, and I said a bunch of times in the book, that choosing it doesn't mean the world changes. It doesn't mean that racism comes to an end because you decide to have a joyful moment.
I have something to say about that. Go.
Yeah. I just want to name the complexity of that. And what I'm saying is an invitation to lean into it, because that can lead to other things. But also, it's okay to say, like, this is hard for me to do, or I don't know about joy because I have bills to pay and I have to find a babysitter and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's real things that are happening. I'm just saying, like, you really are allowed to at least take a deep breath. You have that. You're allowed to do that. Even when that feels insurmountable, you're allowed to do that. And again, in the collective part of it is, it's not only your responsibility to be joyful. It's our responsibility for you to be joyful. That I've done a lot of workshops where the ending of it is you have to share with one person that you love, what does joy mean to you, so that that person knows. So if your joy is like, I need to listen to a Tito Rojas album or whatever, the next time you feel sad or whatever, instead of what usually feels like, you give your prescription, which is, that's nice intention, but that's not necessarily what the person needs. That you could start with what they said. You can start by saying, hey, did you listen to that album yet? Or just put it on. Let's listen to the song. That doesn't mean that they're gonna feel any differently, but the point is to start there, because that's what they told you brings them joy. But yeah, that's not just your responsibility. Is what I'm saying. It gets to be our responsibility for you to be well, for you to have joy.
Please talk about the choir, because there's this really beautiful example that you give in the book of how we breathe together and how we all make space for one another to experience joy, and what it means when I take a breath and you carry the notes, and what that means in practicing joy, right? In me hearing what you say your practice of joy is, and me being the person who brings that to you next time when you need it.
Yes. So I learned, I'm not a singer, but I learned about this choir practice, or like groups of people that sing, that there's a technique, a breathing technique. I don't know what it's called, but there's a breathing technique that when the song, like let's say the group, we were all singing, there's a technique that one or a few people can stop singing to take a breath and the song doesn't end. It keeps going. And that made me think about that, of that relates to people, the groups of people. And I also know that doesn't, a lot of us feel like we can't take that breath. That if we do, things are gonna fall apart. So and so is not gonna get taken care of. The appointment's not gonna be made to, whatever. The things are not gonna be held up. And we could really get into who usually feels like that. Again, look around the room. And still we show up. You know what I mean? That my thing around the choir is, yeah, that of how to, and trust, right? That requires trust. There's rehearsals, you're practicing together, then you build a certain trust that when the moment is to perform, there's enough, you don't have to tell each other. You can literally take the breath and then come back to the song. That's something else that I want for us to have more practice around, that we should be able to take the breath and come back to the song. Um, Especially when it feels like we can't sing at all. We're just forcing it at that point, straining to get the note out, as opposed to having the rest and the care that allows that instrument to do what it needs to do. But yeah, that just felt like learning about that technique felt really connected to this idea of us working with each other, and how are we aware of each other too? Because that also means you have to pay attention to each other, who's singing and who's not singing at the same time, so that you could keep the tempo and these types of things. Um, but yeah, all of that. Even as I'm saying, I'm like, that really does relate to people.
Oh, yeah. And it really does relate to this practice, right? Of being in joy together, not just as something selfish that you do by yourself in the corner. I want to pick a bone with you, and then I'm going to ask our beautiful audience family here to do something to honor our brother, Kleaver. Can you please tell me what is the purpose of art? Because here's my bone. I am reading this beautiful book, right? And there's these brilliant examples of artists like Vivian and many other people in this room, yourself included, who are disrupting the world and doing material things, like real, deep, moving, hard, like moving mountain kind of things. Like, these Black girls matter, and we are going to show them how they matter, not only to the world, but most importantly to themselves, so they can recognize them, right? And that is, to me, if you do that work with the kind of integrity that these artists are working, you are that. There's no more world making than that. And what I hear you say in the book again and again, and you just said it here on this couch, is we're doing we're doing these things. Are we changing the world? Not necessarily. You come back to this refrain again and again. The example of taking those photos in the photo booth. It was a joyful experience, as you describe it. But did it change these people forever? Not necessarily. You always come back to this. And my bone is, there is nothing more powerful than the work that you do, that artists do, right? It doesn't germinate the same way as the rah of somebody that you see standing at the corner and, demanding our attention, maybe with a little bit more force, like more force, like material force. But if we don't have this kind of imagination, how will the revolution ever be like a liberated real space? We're sitting here occupying this space because somebody had the audacity to think these two belong here with published books in front of an audience. So just school me. Maybe I'm missing something. What is the role of art?
Thank you for pointing that out. When I say those things about, well, did that one thing change the world? No, it's more of, part of it is I don't want to make things trite, if that makes sense. Because I also have seen with Black Joy, especially now that it's really part of the zeitgeist, how it becomes watered down. And then it's like, oh, you see everybody smiling, that's joy. And it's so much deeper than that. And I want to be careful that we don't just accept facades and surface things as the thing.
Yes.
Whereas those are like the windows into the thing. That you're right. 100 people getting their picture taken can create a whole other conversation and a vibe. That maybe one could do that too. It's just that, yeah, I think, and I feel like a broken record around the collective piece about something about like us doing things, even if we're making those decisions individually, it does add up. It does add up. And that's what I'm pointing to versus the reduction of what it feels like sometimes around our joy that, even right now that there's like commercials and things that say like, we support Black Joy. And it's a giant corporation.
Treating Black people like
I'm a part of it, so let's not act phony. But what I'm saying is, yes, that it's much deeper than that. It's not just it's almost intangible, kind of. I was saying last night, an example to me is my grandma. She has like really bad arthritis, so her knees are shot, but she really loves salsa, and always talks about dancing. And I love the moments where she just randomly will like bust out a couple moves in the hallway or whatever, and then be like, "Oh my God, mi cadera." But the point is that she did that. You know what I mean? And that to me is like so, for somebody who's had such a like difficult long journey, that on the other side of all of that, she can still have those couple seconds of like, "There's no music. I'm gonna just bust out in my little dance," you know? That I love that, and that gives me so much life. And yeah, that changes something for me, which then has an echo, you know. But her intention in that moment wasn't to shift the world. It was because she felt the spirit to dance salsa, you know.
I love it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to please indulge me. I really believe, actually, I know how important this is because I've had my own experience of this in South Africa. I would love to invite anybody who knows. How many people in the room know Kleaver? I know his mom obviously knows him, but other people who know Kleaver have a relationship with him. Excellent. Excellent. More hands. All the hands. Yes, please. Please keep those hands up. I want to hear from you the ways in which Kleaver is a manifestation of joy.
Oh my God.
Yes, we're doing it.
I met Kleaver. My name is Desiree Montañez. Hi, everyone. I met Kleaver. He said 10 years ago. I think it was a little longer than that. In a program named Landmark that taught us a little bit about ourselves and how to peel the onion. That was like the main thing, that peel the onion. Who are you? And dealing with your emotions. And we were both in a stage in our lives where we were just trying to figure things out and be better than who we were and not part of the things that we went through. And for me, the manifestation of joy is the book that he wrote. Because we talked a lot about our pain and our suffering and the things that we went through. And here we are today. And he's an author.
Thank you.
I did come from San Francisco for the launch.
Oh my God.
I'm so excited. So we went to the same college, maybe not at the same time. But as my daughter says, I might have been in the 1900s. I think I was one of the first people that you interviewed. And he was coming to San Francisco, the Bay Area, and I invited him to come to see Revelations at the DeYoung Museum. So we saw Black art by Black artists, shared a meal with some lovely Black folks, and then we stood outside in the sunshine and talked about Black joy and what that means. And I beg to differ on that. Every little thing from the salsa on down makes a difference in the world. We are the diaspora, and every little thing that we do that does not buy into the stereotype that we are angry or lazy or wrong or not beautiful, or not the face of so many things that have happened to us. We are joy. We are it. And so when we express that in community and alone, we are doing something revolutionary. We are doing something subversive. And I just praise you. Of course.
Thank you so much. You forgot to tell us your name.
I'm Karen Clopton. I was chair of the Human Rights Commission in San Francisco.
Hi. I met Kleaver at a really bougie artist residency in Tennessee. And so I thought there was three things that popped into my mind. I think, examples of Kleaver and joy. The first thing was he gave me a tarot reading, which blew my mind. Yeah. And that was just so profound. Like, I don't know what sort of intuition, as a fairly skeptical person, what sort of intuition a person can have that they can reflect so much from you so deeply, divining from whatever chaotic or larger order there is that shuffle out in front of you. That's, I feel like, a pretty joyful revelation. Then I thought about getting our nails done, and the wonderful conversation we had, long conversation we had with those two Puerto Rican girls. And what? There's no scandal here. Yeah, no, it was like the only conversation in Spanish to be had for miles. But then the thing I really landed on is like, if I may share, you talked about the labor that you put into this, but he was writing the book and really struggling in moments and saying things like, I'm waking up every morning crying from the weight of this, So I feel like actually in counterpoint, I just want to point out that it's like, that's where you were. And I think when you're talking about this deeper thing, and here we are resonating on this other frequency, that's where I feel like there's that alchemy, that transcendence that I think is lurking. So I want to express gratitude to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to call something out that you said there, because I think it's so important and it's at the heart of this project. Again, not shying away from the shadow. And the real mark to me of what could never be equal to the commercialization of our joy is we don't divorce ourselves from the totality of what life is, right? And this book says these are true. Like, we are in joy, and I wake up in the morning crying because this shit is hard. It's both.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Garcia. I met Kleaver at Mona in 2016, which feels like a whole lifetime ago. And for me personally, it was during a very dark time in my life. And going to Mona, for those of you who don't know, is Voices of Our Nation Arts Foundation. It's like a multi-genre writing organization for writers of color. And so Kleaver, yeah, it was in Miami. It was so freaking hot. But but so he was in, you were in the memoir, right? With Kese? Yeah. Yeah. And I was in the young adults, and I just think in that time, since every time I talk about like writing, Dominican speculative fiction, like I don't know, Cleaver and I have had really interesting conversations about, me writing, as another one of our friends said, Dominican sci-fi. But I'm just, but anytime anyone I know writes a book, I just always want to tell them how proud I am. I'm so proud of you. And I get to be like, oh, my friend wrote a book, so of course I'm gonna buy it. That's like one of the places where I break my book bans because I ain't got no room. But I'm so excited to read this book. I'm so proud of you, and I know you're gonna keep on doing amazing things.
Look out for Rebecca's books. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
I'm just saying. We need to make.
Buenas tardes. Good evening. My name is Stephanie. And how is Kleaver a manifestation of joy? They are a manifestation of not only joy, but the courage that it takes to be joyous. So I think we need to talk about their courage and the vulnerability in that courage to not only choose joy, but then share joy, model it, and then create an archive of it for us to remember. They're remembering for those who can't, in this testament of a book, in this archive of a book. They are showing us how disciplines are really an imagination. And within this text, you are crossing all sorts of disciplines and weaving all sorts of stories and lineages, from visual to the written word to sharing even bits of your own poetry. And through those challenges of disciplines and challenges of worlds, as you create them all together, you name joy for us, specifically Black joy. And through their words, heart, spirit, and intentionality and deliberateness to come to fruition in this moment of time when we all need it the most, in terms of this reminder, you come to us. So shout out to you. And shout out to all of you for being here and supporting my really good friend Kleaver. And shout out to the mom again.
Yeah, throwback. Peace, everyone. My name is Naeem. I go way, way, way back with Kleaver. Yeah, we actually met in kindergarten. He and his brother. So yeah, we had a really good elementary school. Had a lot of really dope. We had a really dope second grade teacher, really fast speaking, dope fourth grade teacher, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So like they were, all of them were Black. And so they kind of instilled that into us really, really early. And so I would bump into Kleaver and Walter like once every 4 or 5 years for like a really long time. And they were always just like really on the up and up. And I think it became more frequent after my wife ended up teaching at their middle school. So I connected with them, reconnected with them, started following them on social. And or maybe it might have been a little bit before that, but I remember either a little bit before or a little bit after you actually created the Black Joy Project IG page, you would just pop on to Instagram and you would just have these like little speeches. He was like, "Hey, mi gente," and like you always started it like that. Now I remember that, and you really did kind of inspire me. I do design. I'm a graphic designer, and like I was also really, as many people were, kind of dealing with how to manage with everything that was happening in the world in like the early to mid 2010s. And it was in part you and a lot of those speeches that you gave that like really made it really intentional for me to choose joy and like what that looks like. So when I saw that you were coming out with the book and it was going to be available locally, I'm not ordering this. I'm going to a store and I'm grabbing the book myself. And I made sure to record that because I felt like you deserved that. And, you know, I just wish you the best. I'm happy that we've kept in contact for this long, and proud of you, family.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Carmen, and I had the pleasure of meeting Kleaver, I guess 2014. Woo! So we met, you know, in a response to a crisis, which is actually often where most of the moments of joy that I, know Kleaver from occurred. One, Kleaver and Walter, cruise control, I started calling them. On a bus ride back from Ferguson, Missouri, we were doing rapid response work in Ferguson after Michael Brown was killed by police in 2014. And then so they the twins got into a little good trouble on the way back. I'll just leave it at that. Because I'm like, I don't know if, because mom is in the room, it's little substances being shared, and it's all good, joyful moments. So definitely. And I would say that my sort of understanding of Black joy, like as a theme, as a trope, as a thing, as a body of something, came from Kleaver. I had not heard of anybody talking about Black joy, naming it as such, putting a title to it in the way that Kleaver had. And so that was my introduction to it. And then, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, I started seeing and hearing more people talking about Black joy. And in some ways, there was the co-optation of it, where it was very transactional. It wasn't what Kleaver was talking about. And I knew that, and I knew the distinction and the difference between that. And I also remember the time that Kleaver mentioned when we were at Afropunk having our portraits taken, and it was such a beautiful experience. There were so many people. The Black joy table was more crowded than anybody else's in the area. Am I lying? And people were just so excited to have their portraits taken. Some people did them together, some people did them alone, but it was something that people were definitely like really, really deeply interested in and excited about and joyful about. And then the last thing I'll say is that, the Cruz twins were just known for always being prepared and and just being ready for action, like whatever that meant. And so I personally found joy in joking around about that a lot of time. And always it became like a running thing where it's like, you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready. So
hi everyone. Hi Kleaver. It's so good to see you. So I first met Kleaver around 2015, organizing with We're All Dominican, a group that was working at the time around denationalization of Dominicans of Haitian descent. And one of my memories that pops up of like the birth of this project was being in Rocio Silverio's apartment in the Grand Concourse. And you being like, yeah, I just came back from Amsterdam. Like, I just saw these wonderful, incredible things. Like, it was so eye-opening. It was so refreshing, and you were so excited. And I remember being like, wow, there's something here that's being generated. And then to see that experience then become this book and the website, which I was like screaming around my house looking at last night, because it's incredible. Like the website is just, I was just like geeked, running around screaming, because I was like, wow, like we really need these archives, right? We don't know what's going to happen with these platforms, Instagram, Facebook, but we need to have our spaces. And I think for me, this project is so important and so beautiful because as someone in the Dominican community, you know me through decolonizing work in the community, running in Culture Company and all kinds of other cultural spaces that we've been creating over the years. Like there's such pain that comes up. There's such anxiety. There's such like fear of losing something. Like what do you lose when you let go of this like nationalist, racist narrative? You gain Black joy, right? You gain entry into a global community of people striving for justice. And this book gives you like the map, right? It gives you like this sort of entry, right, into that for folks who are not there yet. So it's like the journey is long and lifelong. And so like creating places of entry is so important and beautiful. And I feel like this book is that. It's just such a gorgeous point of entry. And also, I hadn't seen you in like a really long time. And I saw you last weekend at the Art Museum and you gave me like the biggest hug. And it stayed with me because I was like, oh, that feels so good. So it's like, you know, I think it's more about the product or what gets created or what's done, but it's like how you make people feel. Like you make people feel seen. You make them feel loved, embraced, whether you've seen them all week or you haven't seen them in 3-4 years in person, like we hadn't seen each other. So that is like a gift to be that loving on site, like immediately. So I'm so happy for you, and this is amazing, and I'm so grateful I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I just want to give a shout out to Sky Davis, who's my web designer. Hey, babe.
Hey. Yeah, so many people said so much. Yeah, I'm gonna move slow. Okay. One of the things that comes up for me is being in South Carolina. Being there, I'm like, hey, whatever you say, I'm gonna rock with it. Y'all followed me. Y'all like, hey, if you say you're supposed to be in South Carolina helping these girls, we coming.
Hold on, let's give context. Viv literally got on a bus in 2015 after, if you remember, there was a case of a girl in high school that got slammed in her desk by an officer. Viv literally got on a bus like a day or two after the report came out.
It was a plane, though. It was a plane. Because y'all know I'm bougie. I ain't taking no bus.
The point is...
But they bought my ticket. They bought my tickets because I was broke. I was broke.
The point is she heard a young Black girl say, I needed to stand up in the room because nobody else was going to. And Viv hearing her say that and also thinking about the other girl that was slammed, that was enough for her to feel like she needed to go to this city that she'd never been to, didn't know nobody there. And from that moment, and she was one of the first people to tell me, like, listen, I don't know what's going on in this part of South Carolina, but seeing your images and stuff is helping me get through this right now. And that since that moment, she's created an organization to help Black girls and people in all kinds of places, that she's going to be humble. But that's really important for you to know that it's not just South Carolina. She put herself there to be of service. And it ended up becoming even bigger than the thing she started out to do. Thank you, Viv.
And thank you. Thank you. But I remember specifically, so there's this park, you know how, so in South Carolina, they don't necessarily have projects. So I'm trying to think of a park here, like maybe St. Nick Park or something. Oh no, Mount Morris Park. So we call it the colonies. Y'all gonna call it, you know, it's so interesting that they're segregated, you know, there's Section 8 housing is called the colonies. But we did a back to school thing and Cleve was like, can I set up a booth and take pictures? I will never forget it. It was one girl and he was like, do you know her? I was like, no, she live out here somewhere. And he like, I have to picture her. I have to talk to her. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know this girl. He was doing whatever. It would be 5 years later. I walk in the store and I'm like, I know this girl. she is popping off on everybody in the store. She is popping off on everybody in the store. And I'm like, I know you from somewhere. And I look and I was like, did you go to the back to school event at the colonies? She was like, yo, I know you, miss. The man took my picture. Like, he made me feel so good that day. When I tell you everything in that store de-escalated 5 years prior. So joy is not a thing, it's a way of being. She has something to pull from. Happy, we can all be happy. So I want us to I really want you to know, like, with this project, people really get to discern. I ain't trying to just be happy, because that's an outer thing. You are saying it's an internal thing. What I kept hearing you say is like, I created Black Joy Project, waking up crying. But joy didn't leave me, because it's not a thing. It's a way of being. So my tears are joy. So thank you. So when we talk about manifestation, it's also the call to action when he say we can't, everybody gets to participate. What he's saying is everybody gets to participate. That girl know joy because somebody said you get to have joy. It's not just a selfish one-time thing. That's what you do. That's what you do, my brother. I love you for life.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And please just tell me if that's not world changing. Like, shifts the moons, moves the mountains, changes this girl's life forever.
I'm lucky enough to call Cleve my woo mate. There's a lot I could say. I'll keep it short. I think one of the things I love is that a lot of people get to say they wish they were a fly on the wall, and I really get to be a fly on the wall in Cleve's life. I didn't think I was gonna get emotional. Ever. We're just proud of you, Cleve. Did it. I did it. Something I've been thinking about is everyone keeps talking about how Cleve shows up for people. As I said, being a fly on the wall, one of the things that makes me the happiest is seeing Kleaver show up for himself and themselves. I think that I've seen it grow. Of one of the things I see that brings joy to you and the people around you is giving people grace. That you've learned that what people are carrying or going through is not your thing. As much as we want to be heroes and show up and be there for people, you also have to know when to step back. And I'm proud of you for learning how to step back and choose yourself, because ultimately, if you're not good, you can't help anybody else. So I'm glad that you're learning to choose joy for yourself. So
I told him to go last. Cause who the fuck am I? You know what I mean? Hey. I'm Sabrina, and we met in China. Little Dominican mayhem. Stories I won't share because mom is here. But I have two things to say. A little birdie told me that I have to say this announcement. But before I say that, you fucking beast. You're a fucking beast. You did it. Back to your brother's point, you did it. And you have taught me just to be so courageous. And even in this process, when you were calling your friends and being like, yo, I'm done. This might be it. I'm stuck on chapter 4. It's a wrap. I'm done. Quitting. Even in that, you would still kind of persevere weirdly and find time to be like, but what are you doing? And what do you need? And what challenges are you experiencing with chapter 4, right? Because every chapter in this book is a real thing, right? So just thank you for like, I don't know how you managed to hold all of us. And you were so vulnerable, baby, for like 2 years straight with all of us. It's incredible. And you taught me how to be vulnerable because I'm not. Despite the tears. Okay? I'm pretty tough. You know, a little mini gangster, but you really did teach me how to just be brave and courageous and vulnerable. And I'm in awe to this day. You know, yesterday I texted you, I was like, I saw your book, I died. You know, I just love you and I can't stand it. I can't, because I'm not a roommate. And then the second announcement, a very sexy little bird told me that I have to say this. Kleaver has also been nominated for the NAACP award for new author. So shout out to that. But beyond all these awards, because I know that you're not looking for that, right? Like you didn't come here seeking these awards. But shout out to that. But really shout out to just this, right? Because we got people from kindergarten, smelly little feet, right? We have your mom is here, people that you met in Tennessee a day ago. You know what I mean? You are this is your family. We will hold you up. We got you. Keep writing. Keep crying, keep laughing, keep wearing your outfits, get your hair done, get your beads. We are here for all of it. We're not going nowhere. Okay? Put on my boy.
Oh my God, I've been crying over there. Yo soy una llorona. Hi everyone, my name is Angie, and I think I have more than 10 years knowing Kleaver. To me, Kleaver epitomizes community and artistic expression. And those are the things that have brought me out of those moments of sadness, especially art. I could go into a museum and see artwork, and that immediately changes my mood. Kleaver was a very great poet. I don't know if he still performs. So I'm currently the founder of Dominican Writers Association, and we support Dominican authors like Kleaver to amplify our voices and let the world know that we're out here publishing. And now for those of you who keep mentioning Dominicans are not Black, hello, okay, now we have a whole book that people could look at and they could just put that to sleep, because I just hate listening to that. But yeah, Kleaver and I have been in different spaces at different times during these past years, community events. My poetry organization before Dominican Writers was mixed with activism as well, so we did a lot of that. And it has been such a joy. You know, I think you and I spoke like 3 years ago when you were just starting with this project, and every so often I would be like, "Y el libro?" Because once you tell me you're writing, I'm gonna be like, where's the book? What's going on? And you know, he would be like, it's happening, it's going, you know, and then finally he's like, Angie, the book is coming out. And of course I was like, we're here to support you. So we wrote one of the first book reviews, and we've been promoting the book as well. And I'm just so fucking proud of you. I am so proud of seeing who you've become all these years, and seeing your growth, your evolution, and now seeing you become an author. So thank you so much for this project. I've been sharing it with everybody. I'm like, you need this in your house. You need this in your home. Yes, because it's also 117 photographs of pure Black joy, along with these incredible essays that you should all be reading. So yes. Yeah, I'm gonna promote the hell out of this book. So please purchase this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie. Okay, so this is not what typically happens at a book launch, at a book event. And it's very much on purpose, right? This is us testifying to this beautiful, gorgeous soul and this human being that teaches us what joy is, right? I hope that you've made room to receive all of this. I know that book tours are long, so I hope you always make room to receive this, because this is what the project is. The project is something that is alive. And for everybody in the audience, I really, 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 for me, this is a selfish thing. This is not something that Kleaver has asked me to even say, doesn't know. I hope you experience the book as a call to action. That this thing that you experience here, that you look to the person who's to your left, to your right, that you embody, like you inhale. What does it mean to be fully embodied in joy, right? It's remembering the moments that you've shared with Kleaver, if you've had that with him in person. It's also tapping into the question that he keeps asking you again and again in the book. What is Black joy to you? How do you understand that? How do you experience that? There's a really beautiful conversation in the book, and you and I spoke about it, where you're going to have to give me the name again. One of the artists you were talking to, you asked him, them, I'm not sure their pronouns, what is Black joy to you? And I love the response because they were flummoxed. They're like, I actually, not that I don't know, I need time.
That was Mwende
Katiwa.
Yeah, that was an artist Mwende from high school that when literally the first month of the Black Joy Project, so in January of 2016, I went to New Orleans for work, and Mwende, still there, is at the time was doing poetry stuff, but also doing a lot of community, like youth work. Anyways, I was in their apartment. It was a bunch of their friends. I was asking all of them with my little phone, like, can I take your picture? And then and Mwende is like a renowned poet. Like this person has accolades for writing. And when I asked them, what does Black joy mean to you? It gave a lot of pause. And they were like, actually, I can't answer that today. I need some time. Yeah, I can write volumes about pain and all of these things, but this really gave me pause, and I need time to think about what that means to me, which I thought was really important, because I feel like that happens enough. That there needs to be room for that too.
Yes, I'm bringing it up very specifically because I know all of us walking into this room, we've walked into this room carrying so much life, right? You left a baby at home. You left somebody you love who's texting you constantly and being like, hey, where are you? You said you're going to do X, Y, Z. You've got obligations tomorrow. You're worried about what's going to happen next week. You care about somebody who's going through a painful time. Maybe you're going through a painful time right now. We all came here carrying life, right? And you can wax poetic about that life, about the bills, about the things that you need to tend to. But when somebody asks you, and Kleaver says, what is Black joy to you? Not like as a jingle that you heard on the radio, not as, something that is eloquent and academic and pretty, but to you and the practice of that. That's what this book is about. Am I wrong? Like this book is about like, how do you make that something that's on the inside of you, like that young girl in South Carolina, so that 5 years from now, when you're over here in a moment that is maybe a moment that could take you to a place where you don't want to go ever, right? Like it's a make and break kind of moment, that you have this thing inside of you that's that anchor that brings you back to, even here, I have this thing. I love that story so much, Vivian. We're about to wrap.
Yeah, I'm like, wow.
That's the point. That's the point.
I also want to name something because Angie just talked about it at the end. That's really important, especially because of where we are in a historically Dominican area of New York City. And that she said something that is also should be taken seriously about the contention between being Black and being Dominican. And there's somebody in the room, I'm not going to shout her out, because she's actually one of the most visible activists in the DR, who has endured all kinds of threats to her life, to her family, to the people around her that she cares for, in the name of finding justice, creating a space for citizenship for Dominicans of Haitian descent, for Black people, for dark-skinned Dominicans that are being treated a certain way, that there's work for us to do as Dominicans. And it's not just about Blackness, it's about addressing things like anti-Haitianism, of why is it that we live in a culture that is so insistent and persistent on that we're not something. That's an identity is not to be something, it's to be something. So that we have to be more than the thing we're not. And that we have to address that. And that's not just about our treatment towards Haitian folks, it's towards dark-skinned people that are being read as Black, as African. What is the root of those things? Saudi, who came up earlier, years and years ago, I heard her say something once about like, imagine the trauma that has occurred, you know, that the institution of slavery started in Santo Domingo on that island for over 200 years, before 1619 in the US. Yep. This thing was practiced and perfected in the Caribbean, to a point where in 2024, we still can't talk about it. It's still very tender and sensitive to touch. And that in this moment that we're living in, the Dominican Republic has, in this part of the world, the Western Hemisphere, has the biggest population of denationalized people. Literally the biggest group of people that were told, you know what, just kidding, you're not a part of this country. Even if it's like in my case, my grandparents were the ones that came here, and one day a country decided, because they weren't born in this country, you don't belong here anymore. Even though this is the only place I've ever known as home. Even though this is the only place that she and her friends and her family have known as their home. That we need to really push that. And that's what I mean about addressing the ugly and messy things too, if we're being serious about joy. Because, and I talk about her in the book, that her story is full of joy, and that her childhood is full of joy and those types of things. It's coming into the reality that she's in a place in a world that doesn't love her and the people like her back. And that's all of our responsibility to correct that. And if you're Dominican and you're listening to me, I'm saying that that doesn't mean go to every protest and march. That means have a conversation with your tia, with your grandparents, with your sister, with the people around you that are closest to you, to maybe not turn your head the next time somebody says something anti-Black or anti-Haitian in your family or in a setting that you're in. And push more than just saying that's not okay to say, that we have to have a conversation about why that's not okay. And that this is a slow thing. It takes a long time to change somebody's mind deeply. Because imagine look how long it took us to learn that hate. So how long will it take us to unlearn it? Hopefully not as long. But yeah, I just want to give that special shout out, call in to Dominicans in the room, that we have work to do around that. And again, also, I hate that conversation about Dominicans not being Black, because there are racist people like the one I'm talking about that's in this room, and other people like her, that there's a long history of Black women and Black folks in the DR standing up proudly inside of that, who were also part of rebellions and revolts during the institution of slavery, who have done a lot of work throughout time since then to maintain that pride. That is just not correct. It's disingenuous to disassociate Blackness from being Dominican. That doesn't mean every Dominican is Black, let's be clear. But that's very much a part of our culture, our being, our everydayness. And that the question can be, how, again, that's why I ask, what does Black joy mean to you? Because language is such a different thing for each of us, that it's important for us to meet people where they are and how they understand things, and then we can go from there. So thank you so much for being here. I guess I'll be signing books or whatever.
Wait.
Oh, there's more.
Wait. Last question for Kleaver here, because that's a really important call-in to, community. But Kleaver, this is really important. Revolution and liberation. I mean, one of the most beautiful things about this book is it reminds us that the purpose of revolution, before you even have that word in your head, you better have an image and a vision of what that revolution, what that liberation that we're fighting towards is. So I would love to hear from Kleaver in closing, because you began this entire conversation as an invitation to every single kind of human being, right? To make room, to make all of us feel welcome. What is it? Where are we going? Where are you taking us with this book? What does it look like? What does it taste like? I feel like we've got a really good visual on what it looks like through this book, but anything you would love to say that is about this place?
Yeah, I'm a deep believer, again, because of the comrades that I had like 10, 15 years ago. Carmen, Vivian, Walter, and other people that are not in the room, there was an activity we did once during one of our retreats where we had to envision what is the world after the revolution. And that really stayed with me since doing that. Of if we, and history shows us this, that if we don't imagine and think about what happens after the takedown, then we just get more of the same or a remix. That is very important for us to not just think about taking things down, but what's going to be in its stead. Exactly. And that for me, the vision of the after part is healed people. Healed people heal people. And I want us to be well, that all of this boils down to us being well. I just really, that's how all this started for me. I was just fucked up and sad. I wanted to feel better. I wanted to be well. And that in that vision, that's what I see, is that we really get to have joy in the sense of being well. That we're not going to be in this constant cycles of we don't have enough to eat. We don't have enough. We don't have places to sleep. We don't get along with our neighbors and that type of thing. That, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I see in that other world that we're building towards is joy is the base and not the thing that we have to keep fighting for or defend. It's just, we just get to be. Because I'll say that too, is of all the interviews and just asking people that simple question, it all boils down to, we just want to be allowed to do our thing, to be fully self-expressed without interruption, without being told how to be. We just want to be. That's it. That's a type of freedom.
That's a wrap, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Kleaver.